Now I would like to talk about the natural law. Recovery has a necessary moral component. Dr. Silkworth called it moral psychology. Recovery necessarily involves moral rectification. And in my opinion, addiction and recovery can be explained by virtue and vice. Now, human morality and virtue and vice are only completely explained by the natural law. The damage the addict does to himself in his life can be explained as disobedience to the natural law. The fulfillment and fullness of the life that the addict has experienced in recovery can be understood as obedience to the natural law. Therefore, by understanding the natural law, we can gain a further understanding of addiction and recovery. St. Thomas defines law as an ordinance of reason for the common good by him who has care of the community. So the first and most important point about law is that it is an ordinance of reason. The purpose of a law is to order and originates in an intellect. Order is defined as means being directed to their ends, or the purpose of the mean is found in the end. Only an intellect knows purpose. Therefore, order can only come from an intellect. You cannot have a law that did not originate in an intellect. Second, a law is for the common good. It is for the health and well-being of its subjects, not only of the individual but of the community. And the well-being of the community is founded in equality. In other words, a law must be just. A law enacted not for the common good but for the sake of exercising authority is not truly a law. And a law can only be enacted by the one who has authority. A law is binding because it comes from reason. One must not act against contrary to reason. Finally, the subjects of that law are obliged to obey under pain of punishment. God, being the creator and origin of the universe, also has the authority to govern. Just as in the mind of the artist there pre-exists the thing made by art, so in the mind of every governor there exists the type of order whereby his subjects are ordered. The type that pre-exists in the mind of the governor is called a law. The idea in the mind of God that orders all means in the universe to their ends, which is their good, is called the eternal law. In other words, the eternal law is the entire plan for the universe that exists in the mind of God. Now, this eternal law governs all of creation, from stones to men. Now, men have a special relationship to the eternal law, because although man is made with certain inclinations, he can know his end and choose to follow it or not. Man's participation in the eternal law is called the natural law. The natural law is not so distinct from the order of the universe. It is merely man's participation in the order of the universe. So human morality is found in our very nature, of which God is the author. Now, a law is only binding when it is known. It must be promulgated. Yet, the natural law exists in the mind of God. How can we know it? We know the natural law based on the principle that a cause is present in the effect, that we can know something of a cause by examining the effect. Thus, a beautiful sunset leads us naturally to the conclusion that there is beauty in God. Thus, we can know God's intention for man by examining human nature. For example, we can know the intention of an automobile engineer by examining the nature of an automobile. We can see the automobile was made to put oil in the engine and gas in the gas tank. To put oil in the engine and gas in the gas tank is good for the automobile and is part of the natural law of the car. The car was not made for sugar to be put in the gas tank. This would damage the car and therefore be contrary to the natural law of the car. The reason of man understands the natural law. For it is only the reason that is able to grasp the end of man's nature that is ordered by the natural law, and the means to those ends. The acts of reason in man can be divided into two groups: speculative reason, which concerns truth and practical reasoning, which is man's moral reasoning, and can be divided into two groups: speculative reason, which concerns truth, and practical reason, which is man's moral reasoning. Just as speculative reasoning is governed by first principles, such as the principle of contradiction, so does natural law, being an ordinance, govern man's moral reason. The natural law is the first principle from which man's moral reasoning proceeds. Just as man falls into error when he deviates from the first principles, so man's moral reasoning falls into error when he deviates from the natural law. What I'm about to say is the most important thing I can say about the natural law, and grounds the natural law in metaphysics. If you recall at the beginning of this paper, I talked about truth and beauty and goodness, and how they transcend definitions. When we look at truth, we find it is also good and beautiful. This is called the convertibility of the transcendentals. Now, the first thing that falls into the speculative reason is being simply considered. So the first thing that falls into the practical reason is the good. This is only possible because of the convertibility of the true and the good. What this means is that if we want to know what is good for a being, its end, we must look at its being, its essence, and in its existence. This convertibility makes all moral reasoning possible, which starts with the truth and ends with an obligation. This truth grounds the 12 steps in metaphysics. The first three steps are a form of moral reasoning, which starts with the truth and ends with an obligation to act. Now we have the first self-evident principle of the natural law, which all further moral principles are founded, and it's simply this: do good, avoid evil. But what is good and evil? The good that is that which is in conformity with our nature. Evil acts against our nature. But what is natural? The word nature can be used in several ways with different meanings. One way nature is used is to refer to the essence of the thing. That is the meaning of that is intended in the above sentence. The natural law is a fundamental ordinance placed in the essence of a thing towards specific ends and actions which achieve those ends. To clear up what is meant by natural, one could say that it is natural for an alcoholic to drink. This is not what I mean. For it is natural for men to use reason, and alcohol inhibits reason. So although you can say it is natural for an alcoholic to drink, it is actually against the natural law, for drunkenness is contrary to reason. Since the law follows our natural inclination, the natural law will be ordered by our natural inclination. The first fundamental inclination of a man is the conservation and preservation of his being according to his nature. So man is to live, and to live as a man, to live according to his essence. So the first ordinance of the natural law is that the life of man should be preserved, and death and those things which damage man's nature to be avoided. Since man is a rational animal and the natural law proceeds from the essence of man, then the second inclination should concern those things which we share with animals, such as procreation and eating and sleeping. The third inclination that comes from the essence of man concerns him as rational. Because man is a rational animal, the use of reason is in accordance with the natural law. Because of the power of reason, there arise certain ends to which man is ordered by the use of his reason. Because the end is the good of the means, because the use of reason is unique to man, they are called intelligible human goods. First, man desires to know truth for the truth's sake, the truth of himself, of God, of society, of the universe. The purpose of man's life is to know the truth. When man knows, he enlarges himself, he expands his essence. because the being that is known is incorporated into the very being of the knower. Man has a natural inclination to contemplate the beautiful, so he searches out the beautiful face of a child. And the ultimate beauty that man seeks is within himself through moral action. The action of man's intellect isn't merely practical and moral. Man can use his intellectual powers for creation and leisure. Man not only contemplates beauty, but he also expresses that beauty within himself in various crafts, in the pursuit of hobbies, art, music, carpentry, chess, video games. All these man pursues for their own sake. Man rejoices in his increase in skill. He uses his gifts and acknowledges the giver. All these things bring joy and fulfillment to man's life, and he would be incomplete without them. Man is a social animal. He is born into a family and discovers himself through those relationships. He is born into a society through which he must find his place. He seeks friendships. He wants to share the goodness in him and to receive what others have to give. And this giving and receiving fulfills a deep longing in his heart. Others allow him to see what he was unable to see before, and this change in perspective enlarges him, and his friends are likewise enlarged by his contribution. Friendship isn't merely utilitarian, but is pursued for its own sake. And just as beauty is necessary for art, so truth is necessary for friendship. It is the truth that friends give and receive, and in that they share it in contemplation. Although not everybody is religious, especially in modern Western civilization, the majority of the people on earth through all ages have been religious. Therefore, religion is an end to which we are ordered. Because of man's spiritual nature, he can conceive a universal good beyond all particular goods that he perceives, and his heart longs for this good. Man sees that there is order in the universe. He seeks to explain this order. One manifestation is a search for the practice of ritual, where man connects himself to the order and meaning of the universe. Man is aware of his limits and his finite nature, and knows there must be a purpose in the universe beyond his limited self. Because of man's finite nature, there is an infinite gulf between God and man, a gulf that is impossible for man to cross on his own initiative. That bridge can only be crossed by God coming to man. Man instinctually knows this and searches for the God who reveals himself. Man is inclined to marriage by the natural law. He is also inclined to give himself in love, completely holding nothing back, to his spouse. He is inclined towards a total intimacy with his spouse that is impossible with anybody else. The marital act is a form of knowledge. Each reveals himself to the other, and if this knowledge of love proceeds to its natural conclusion, the result is procreation, a new life to share love with. This is because goodness is self-diffusive. Goodness is not contained within its boundaries. Goodness overflows, just as the goodness of God overflowed into creation. Now, what is the relationship between the alcoholism and the natural law? Well, of course, alcoholism is contrary to the natural law. Though I have explained the primary precepts of the natural law, there are secondary precepts found in the first. One of these is that I cannot destroy any human good for the sake of any other good. Alcohol, however, destroys all the intelligible human goods. Alcohol destroys the truth because it leads to delusion to the point that the alcoholic cannot differentiate the true from the false. Also, the truth is destroyed through the lies of the alcoholic, the lies he tells himself and others. It also destroys beauty because the drunk man cannot contemplate beauty, and it destroys beauty in the soul of the alcoholic, for the alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. Alcohol destroys relationships between friends and family. It destroys marriages. First, there can be no giving and receiving between persons when you are drunk. For giving and receiving must be based on truth, and the drunk is not in touch with the truth. Secondly, relationships are destroyed because of the immoral behavior that is correlated with alcoholism. The chief offender is using others as means to your end. The opposite of love is not hate, it's use. The human being should be loved as end in themselves. To use someone assaults their nature as a person and makes them an object. The alcohol may have an abundance of fond feelings for his friends and families, but if he is using them, there can be no love there. And most tragically, man cannot meet his final end, which is God, while he is drunk. He cannot serve or obey God, nor is he concerned with any purpose beyond his little self. Every religion that I know of prohibits drunkenness because of this. It inhibits man from finding God. Why is alcoholism so destructive? The answer is simple: because alcohol destroys the use of reason. If reason is corrupted, everything founded on reason is corrupted, which is our entire life. If you destroy truth and beauty and relationships and your spirituality, this is your entire life. Recall that the very first inclination of the precept of the natural law was for man to preserve his life in his essence. Now, the essence of man is a rational animal. Alcohol violates the very precepts of the natural law because it assaults reason, which is a part of man's essence. If man is a rational animal and you take away reason, then all you are left with is an animal. The problem is even worse than that because there is no animal as dysfunctional as an alcoholic.